Okay, well, I've got a couple of people joining us. I might at least kick off with the introduction. So, thanks guys for coming along tonight. As said to a number of you beforehand, is that the real purpose of doing today is for people that have never met Andrew to do so. So the fact that Andrew's come to back in Australia for the first time in about 2.5 years, and now he's the Chief Executive Officer of your company, it only right that we should also get him around to meet some of the shareholders. So that's principally the purpose. So if people worry that there's going to be a big announcement one way or the other that's related to this roadshow, it's not. It's more a circumstance of timing, given that the borders have opened in WA, and we've been able to get Andrew here. So basically, the format for tonight is that the deck that you've now seen we put out with the ASX yesterday. Andrew will run through that. It's got a number of different stages within that. So welcome, Rob.
G'day, how's it going? Sorry I'm late.
Yeah, it's been a while, Rob. So yeah, it's as Mike said, it's just an update. It's for me to get around, for you guys to ask me questions directly that you don't get to ask normally, and just to bring you up to date what's happening on site, what's happening in China, what's happening in the world of graphite as I know it at the moment. And as Mike said, look, feel free to interrupt me, but there are certain sections that we'll go through, and whatever you want to ask, I'll try and answer the questions. Because we've announced this, this is just the disclaimer that you guys can read through. Graphite markets. I know there's been a couple of questions on this slide to Mike already. There's been a 10 to 20 or 10 to almost 40% rise in prices over the last 6 months. There's a couple of reasons for it. For instance, the eastern provinces of China have locked down. They normally lock down in the winter and they stop production. But now that they've wanted to start up again, there's been lockdowns. They've been kept in lockdown by the government because of environmental concerns in many of these mines. The same as what the government did in the Shandong province a year or two ago. I've been to many of these mines. The ones in the Shandong especially they're old, they're tired, they environmental disasters, and the government just shut them down. The Heilongjiang province is mainly small flake, and you can see the serious rise in the small flake there. There's obviously a bigger demand in small flake at the moment for the electrical vehicles part of it, and that price has gone up about almost 40% in the past 6 months. Normally it's hovering around, for the miners 194, it's hovering around 500, 550, and I saw yesterday it's up to $830 a ton for the small flake. Our comment there is when it's adjusted to the TGC for total graphite carbon for the DFS, this is 94 to 95%. Our DFS is based on graphite above 95%. So for every percent that it's higher in grade, you get a 2% to up to 5% increase in price. It jumps quite a bit if you go from 96 to 97%, for instance. Then that's where you get a 5% increase on the previous price, and vice versa. If you're delivering 93%, you'll get penalised 2% on your sales price, and that's typically what's in offtake agreements. Is you have these penalties if you're not delivering to spec, firstly on the grade, but also on your flake distribution in each flake size. George Miller, who I've met quite a few times of Benchmark Mineral Intelligence, has put it out there that there's not enough attention paid to the deficit. Nobody's putting money into startup projects like us, into new graphite supply into the market. We're one of 2 companies, listed companies that in the world that are bringing a project online. The other one is in Madagascar, Canadian company, and they talking about 17,000 tons a year that they're going to put on the market. I can tell you a lot about Madagascan graphite versus Tanzanian graphite. It's not the same. We're not really in the same market as the guys in Madagascar. Other things are the shipping issues that we're facing at the moment. There's just, and I've spoken to a few of you now already. There's just issues with getting ships out of China, issues getting your hands on containers. Same with us. We originally decided to, or when we put our schedule out, we were going to have 5 shipments with our 90 containers that we were going to send to site. That's obviously not happening. When we started now, we said, okay, let's make that 10, and that's already, we've got 11 ships at sea, and we're still not finished. We're just putting things on as they can go. Getting your hands on containers is an issue. Even sometimes 4 or 5 containers, you just don't get it in China. It's very difficult. But we're managing that by just being very nimble and flexible and sending stuff from wherever we can. But that's obviously got an influence on the graphite price at the moment. And we also see that there's quite a premium paid in Europe at the moment for flake graphite. Europe gets probably 80-90% of their flake graphite out of China, and there's the transport cost of that gets added to that, but they are willing to pay a premium for graphite at the moment. Diversification of supply and so forth. And just saw it yesterday that the global graphite market is estimated to be $26 billion in 3 years' time. So it's growing, and it's growing fast.
Just before we move up, 2 questions I often get about those benchmark ones is that their FOB in Shanghai is the prices there, so there is a shipping cost to get it there. But a lot of where that's moved from is that China used to just be a net exporter of graphite. Now it's a net importer, so it has to bring that in. So while that's historically the way that things have been measured, and they say, well, we don't care because we are the centre of the graphite universe, and therefore we'll price everything based on almost an internal Chinese price. That's changing, and so the relativities of whether it's FOB or includes the freight cost in there will change in the future.
So we've all seen these slides a couple of times before of the supply and demand, driven mainly by the battery or the smaller flake industry. But that said, the larger flake, there's also, I think you said CAGR yesterday is 6% for predicted, but it's predicted to grow 100% over the next 10 years at least. SGL Carbon, a very high-level graphite user in Germany and in the US, and I know them well, and they just don't know where is the supply going to come on. As I've said many times, and Mike's also said it, we're focusing on our core business. That's to get a mine into production, is to get new product on the market, which nobody else seems to be focusing on anymore. Everybody's looking at the downstream opportunities. Thanks, Mike. And not the upstream. I normally get those two mixed up. So that's what we said. We'll focus on the upstream part of it, deliver to the market. That's our core business, and then we can look further. But unfortunately, there's not as many projects coming online as what Benchmark Mineral uses in a lot of their models. They use whatever's on the market there. So there's a lot of graphite companies listed on the TSX and AIM and ASX, and which have their aspirations of what they're going to produce. And these guys use that and say, what are the probabilities of these guys coming online? And to date, none of them have come online. So we're the first one or one of 2 that Benchmark actually uses in their modeling, which is now probable. The rest nobody knows if they're going to come online or when.
Andrew, just when you were talking about China and the existing mines over there, I can't remember your exact words, but it sounded like they were declining in productivity. Is that representative around the world, that existing graphite mines have perhaps reached peak production and are now starting to taper off?
Well, certainly in the Shandong province in China, yes. Some of the mines I've been to in Heilongjiang province also been there for 30 years, 40 years. So, but there's also exploration happening in China. There's also new projects opening up in Heilongjiang province, Inner Mongolia. Shandong's a bit quiet now because they really don't want to use that for a mining district anymore. But as mines go off, there's other ones starting up. So never underestimate what China can do. They can also increase production of some of their mines. But it is mainly small flake. In some of the provinces, there's been mandates that out of this province, only small flake must be produced. So they have to grind the stuff down until it is small flake. So that's good news for us. So it takes some of the larger flake out of the market, and there's not as much competition for us. And with the larger flake market also predicted to grow at quite a healthy rate over the next 10 years, there's not much new large flake coming into production. I've seen some of the deposits in Inner Mongolia. yes, very nice large flake, but at 1% head grade. Well, you cannot run a thing economically at 1%, so that doesn't mean much in our books.
Thank you. Sorry, well, is our market China? Is that primarily going to be our market, or is our market, we don't know yet?
Well, it's not that we don't know yet. It's not only China.
Yeah.
So, yeah, China is still a bit of the centre of the universe for graphite, which means you have to have an eye on China, but it doesn't have to be exclusively China.
Yeah, you'll be naive to think that you're going to be in the graphite space and not deal with China at all. Because 100% of all beneficiation, if your graphite needs to be beneficiated, is done in China. If it goes into the batteries, 100% comes out of China, the spherical graphite. If it goes into graphite foils or expandable graphite, probably 85 or 95% it comes out of China. So it is very China-centric. But that said, there's a big drive from people outside of China to diversify their supply. Remember, there's a lot of industries that they don't need a further beneficiated graphite. Some industries need graphite at 80%, and that's what they want. You don't want 95%, they're not going to pay you for it. But a lot of the end users are looking for something at 95, some of them are 96, some are looking at 94, whatever it is, but there's no further beneficiating. It's used as is in their product. And as I've said many times, not one graphite deposit's the same. There's always differences in what's in that 5%. That's where the issue is. Is it harmful? Is it abrasive? Is it silica rich? Whatever it is. So it's important that you know what's in your 5% gang for your end use as well. And our focus is obviously on the larger flake size. Our purity that we want to deliver is above 95%, but it's that high value product that where our main focus must be. I've always said it. The small flakes minus 100. If you sell it into the battery market, or you sell it into the refractory market, or you sell it into the lubrication market, the price is still $500 a ton, or now $800. You don't get a premium if you sell it into the battery market. That's it. It gets sold according to its flake size and its grade. Just the forecast going forward. We've seen that this is where it's predicted to be in 2022. We've already reached those figures last year, so it is actually growing faster than predicted here, and with a major growth in the flame retardants. We've all seen the Granville disaster in London and many others, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, a survey was done in this city to see how many of these buildings are compliant. And yep. But even in Australia, not many buildings are compliant when it comes to flame retardant cladding and so forth. So that's where we see a big jump in the growth of or the use for expandable or large flake graphite. And the graphite our graphite, any graphite from East Africa for that matter, or from Tanzania, Madagascar, is not the same. The expandable ratios are good. Typical Chinese expansion ratio is 200 to 300, and as you've seen in our test work, ours is up above the 500 average over all flake sizes. So there is that big difference of us, and which can be used then in these industries, graphite foils and the flame retardants. And also with graphite being declared a critical mineral in the USA, the EU, Great Britain, Japan, Australia. There is this need that they need to, and they don't want to be so reliant on the supply chains out of China to get a supply from elsewhere. So I'm speaking to a lot of people. I've did a piece with the British Geological Survey a year or so ago where they were focusing on Africa because they know that's where the graphite's going to come from. It's not going to come from, there are graphite deposits elsewhere, but Africa is certainly the focus of graphite.
So Steve, just to further, so the two probably new drivers is the supply chain security, which is mentioned there. So people just don't want to be overly dependent upon one source of supply, which is China at the moment. So that adds to premiums that may be available outside of that. And the other part, which Andrew will come back to later on, is a lot of these end customers want to know the ESG credentials of the product they're receiving. So it's everything from carbon footprint to complying with the UN sustainable development goals, all those type of things. So coming out of China can be a bit murky at times in terms of that. Whereas there will be some customers that'll just say we want to know the provenance of our product because it's going into an iPhone or whatever it is.
Yeah, so it's I know I think it's Volkswagen that came out by the year 2025 or 2030, all their raw materials that goes into whatever they use must have the correct ESG and carbon footprint credentials. Now, I don't know how you do that if you're getting your stuff out of China. Anything on the market that you guys want to know? You can always come back and ask me later, so it's fine. Obviously, you want to know what's happening on the mine sites. We are building a mine in a time which I don't think any of us have seen before, especially of supply lines, and how do we handle that? How do we manage that? It is challenging, as I've said. We're trying to be nimble around it. We can't get to China, for instance, so we've got a team over there that's looking after our QC, working with our EPC project or the EPC contractor to get how can we work better or smarter to get our shipping more regular to site. So that's on the way. With every consignment, you have to get about 2-3 options. We've seen ships just cancel that you've booked, ships arriving late, ships leaving late, ships, and everybody that does anything to do with import knows all about this. It's a bit of a wild world out there when it gets to shipping. We've also seen ships go to various port and transshipments, and it takes a ship much longer than what we originally thought to get it to site. Now, obviously, that has an influence on your schedule. Our project guys have been looking into that for quite some time, and how we mitigate it for that again. So how do we work on site to work a bit smarter? So when the equipment comes through, can we work on various fronts? How do we prepare our civils that we don't only go according to the construction schedule, but you can now work in 3-4 places at the same time? You do increase your people, it has a safety risk increase, all that, but it's what we're doing to just try and keep to schedule on the whole project. So a lot of people, and I know Mike's got a few questions after we put this slide on, but the main aim of this is that we're building this project in a time which and we're building to a schedule that is aggressive from the start in any case, and at a time that nobody's ever seen before. So we're doing our best, and to date it's going well, to stick to the schedule, and you know, we have to keep an eye on what's happening out there in the world. People have said, are we going to have an issue getting stuff out? That's not the issue. It's getting stuff out of China. It's getting stuff in. As we've spoken before now, is there's heaps of containers stacked all over the world. So the issue is not getting containers in Dar es Salaam, it's getting containers in China at the moment, and getting them out from Dar es Salaam. And all predictions are is that this will take it'll take a couple of years to normalize, but all indications are that we are now at the worst part of it. So what's happening in China? This is obviously the heart of the thing, where the EPC contractor comes from. As I've spoken before, the shipping and how we adapting for that, breaking up of shipments. For instance, a consignment that was just planned for one vessel will go over 2 vessels. That photo at the bottom there, 2 of our vessels that were lying outside of Dar es Salaam. I've never seen so many vessels lie outside of Dar es Salaam, because there is an issue with congestion there, with all kind of infrastructure projects in and around the port. But that's just something we have to deal with. There's not much that we can do at this stage about it. But we are working on that, don't worry. Put it out there that there was the plan to keep stuff in storage in Dar es Salaam before it goes to site, but that's off the rail now. That's everything will just, as soon as it gets to port and it's cleared by customs, it will go to site. I did say that containers, that container that's on the ship wants his own container back. You can't swap that container for another one. He wants his own container back. Therefore, we have to offload it in Dar es Salaam at our contractor's warehouse. Either stack it into new containers, or into one of their containers if it needs to go. A lot of the steel structures can just be put on a truck and taken directly to site. But there's a double handling again, because you have to give them their containers back within 7 days, or you start paying huge penalties, and it is a lot of money. So we're just trying to save on that. By just putting it into containers and take it to site. If we need to leave the container there, it stays and it's locked until we need the equipment. Yeah, and it's quite cheap to rent a container. It's expensive to buy a container now. The costs went up from something like $2,000 to $6,000 a container. So we're looking at other options, because we don't need that many to keep that many containers. We've got a couple of containers that will leave Melbourne in the next 3 weeks or so. So there's the screens that we've previously announced that we're manufacturing. We did a change to the back end of the plant because that's most important. Firstly, you have to deliver your product to spec, is the grade, above 95% or whatever the percentage we're going to do. If it's higher, it's higher. But it is the distribution of your flakes within each sieve category is very important. So if we say we've got a ton of plus 30 mesh material, the norm is 80% of that material must be above plus 30. There'll always be smaller flakes associated with the nature of graphite. So it's a platy material. So the screening is efficient, but you'll always get something else or smaller flake that gets stuck in your product that you're screening. So 80% of it must be above the mesh size that you say, and then the grade must be right. So that's the norm all over the world. So these screens are being manufactured here and in the USA. The motors are coming over from the USA now, will be assembled, stacked into 3 containers and sent directly from Melbourne to Dar es Salaam. But that's not on the critical path. That's in the back end of the plant. That's your last, before it goes into your bagging machine, that's one of the last things that happens. So it's not, they'll reach Dar es Salaam in June or so, or in May. Last shipment is scheduled to leave the end of April. As I said, the schedule and reality is 2 different things when it comes to shipping, but we're constantly working on that to see, does it affect the critical path? How can we mitigate for that in country? And what the slippage is, if there's any. So it's a thing that changes on a weekly basis, and we try and keep ahead of it, or we try and just keep ourselves aware of what's happening so that we can make the plans accordingly in country.
Andrew, has zero COVID in China affected that production, or is it likely to?
So Yantai has been safe to now. Well, Shanghai's, nothing's close, but it's south of Yantai. But Yantai has had no shutdowns. We had no influence of when there was the power crisis earlier or last year. And to date, everything's fine. Our attritioning mills, which is a big rim designed mill, was built elsewhere because it's not a Yantai design. So they outsourced that. 3 days before it was supposed to leave, they shut that city down. So those are stuck now. We're looking, but it will go in a later shipment. But the feedback that I'm getting from Bruce that it's not on the critical path. So they can come with one of the later shipments. It's not going to affect the build of the plant. It's the attritioning mills between each flotation stage. It goes into this mill, which has got a impeller in it, and it gets filled with the beads or silpebs, what we're going to use. And it's just a gentle polishing stage process between each flotation. So that's one of the things that we looked at, and there's a lot of work that somebody asked me about the design. A hell of a lot of work went into attritioning mills and tip speeds and impellers modifications and whatnot. So that was part of the design done through Bigrim in Beijing, who did the bulk test work for us.
What we've got coming in now is not as much in the structural part of it, so probably when we get the next shipment or 2, that'll be most of the big kit, that needs to be constructed. Then after that, you're down to sort of pumps and control units and spares and things like that will be coming in.
Yeah, so we're not stressed about those last few shipments because it's the last one will have the spares in. That's part of the EPC contract, is a spare list for 6 months for the plant. So if that comes late, it's no issue. But it's getting these ones that are on the critical path, and if they're going to hang around Dar es Salaam for 4 weeks, that's not helping us. But that's what I'll go and work on now. On site, a lot of things happening. The ROM wall that you've seen through Mike's Twitter has been going up and now complete. It's quite a nice design. It's not the first one that's been built in Tanzania, but there was the original design was a big concrete thing that was done by the Chinese, and we just said, well, certainly we can do it different. And our civils contractor and our earth moving contractor has done this before on Shanta, for instance, in Tanzania. So it's quite a sturdy and quite a nice design. I had a comment just now that we've only got mobile concrete mixers on sites, and we should only take photos of that. But unfortunately, there's a concrete mixer, a big truck standing on the top there. So that's happening now. There was a pour yesterday done of 60 tons, or no, not 60 tons, 40 tons in one of the crushing units that's been poured. So those pours are now happening at a more or less continuous pace, and the small machines are still being used. I can get some photos of them, but if there's a small plinth, we'll just do it with a mobile mixer. So, in any case, there's a.
That mix is part of the original design, so we're just going to keep it flowing.
Yeah, I'll make sure you can get some photos. I'll send them to Mike. So there's.
The president standing next to them. That'll give Mr. G something to talk about.
So one of the things we've done is just steadily increase the number of people on site to get the civils way ahead of the schedule. There was obviously the schedule to fit in with the shipments. The shipments is all over the show, and now we're just getting the civils done as far as possible ahead. Bruce White, our project manager, is on site, and his words to them is, it must look like ants here. So that's happening now. There's certainly a number of places that they're opening up for the as you can see in this bottom photo here, that's of the final bin. But there's a number of form work and rebar work that's going on at the same time now to get various fronts open so that we can. Once the equipment goes there, we'll park it as close as possible where it's going to be used, and then it can just be erected on the plinths. All casting items, we've actually flown most of them to Dar es Salaam, so there's been 2 consignments flown by air, just to, and we're very happy that we did that now, because if they were going to be stuck with the ships, then you'll get to a point where you can't put in your casting items, you can't erect your steelwork when it's there. The delivery of the equipment, there's as you saw, there's some of the stuff is on site already. The mobile equipment, the crane and the front end loaders, the telehandler, all that's on site, which will be used in the construction. And there's 4 containers offloaded already at the port, with another 7 on their way. Those are clearing customs at the moment. Bruce is with our logistics contractor today to see how they're going to do this reloading of containers and what goes on trucks directly to site without going into containers. So all that is happening as it's not, as I said, it's not going to be in storage anymore. And the TSF, that's because of the rains that we've had. There's a lot of work done on the TSF, but the rains are stuffing us around a bit, because there's a clay layer that goes underneath the liner that remains wet, so it's difficult to spread. But they are working on the key, for instance, and getting that in place. And then we're going to start with the blasting of the waste rock that we use in the tailings dam for the tailings dam wall. We have planned for the worst case scenario, so there's a membrane or a polymembrane at the bottom of the TSF, so that you don't have any potential acid drainage that you have. We have to be very careful about these things. So it's lined firstly with the clay, and then with the membrane on top of that, to prevent any acid drainage. And the waste rock mining is I just did the design for them recently. It's targeting the hanging wall of the deposit, so you're exposing that. So you're exposing actually more of the ore than what you would have needed for the first couple of years, but at least we're saving on some of that operating cost going forward. It's not just a borrow pit in some arbitrary place, it's in the pit itself. It's very difficult not to mine graphite where we are. There's a lot of graphite there, but we've stated publicly many times before, anything less than 5% we're not interested in. So a lot of that will go and sit in the tailings dam or in the tailings wall, and I will have the geo on site that will manage that. The guy that's done most of the logging of this, so he's got a good idea of what is good ore and what needs to be stockpiled, and managing that process for us.
We're very happy with our contractor, TNR. In fact, happy with both contractors, but yeah, TNR is doing all the work around here, doing an excellent job. And one of the things that they've committed to us around the TSF, even though there's been some modest weather delays, so they were ahead of schedule, but then they've lost that buffer because of some of the weather delays, and they're a little bit behind now. But they're just going to commit more people and more equipment. So it's on that area we're not particularly concerned at all. We think that the quality of the work that they do, and they are committed to really delivering on that schedule. So and we're talking about a few percent. We're not talking about massive changes there.
So I've just put it on top there. There's no overruns in cost here. This is a fixed price contract with them. Yes, there's some ups and downs in certain areas, but to date there's been no overruns. Even if the tailings dam is 3 weeks or so behind, it doesn't mean that it's 3 weeks more in cost. It's just it's a fixed price. It's an earth-moving cost. We know what the cost for clearing and grubbing is. We know what the cost is for transporting of material, and they've been sticking to that. And as I've said, we've got the independent project manager that signs off on everything that they've done and before any money is released from the bank. So to date, there's been no cost overruns either in Jinping or with our other major contractor here. Okay, so the debt facility, we've given the bank now everything they need for the conditions precedent. We've obviously been working on these since the start of the project. There wasn't much outstanding. The biggest one outstanding was the standby letter of credit that we left as late as possible. That was the last condition precedent that's needed. That is now in place and been signed with the standby letter of credit banks out of Europe. That's gone to CRDB and they're working through that. Just goes through their various departments. So that's we expect to start drawing down on that debt facility next, beginning of April, which is next week.
Which is Friday.
Yeah. Okay. So
Will that be announced, Andrew?
if we can. Yeah. There's a that will be announced.
The questions from that is Walkabout fully funded, and that just takes all the legalities out of it. We're fully funded with that drawdown, as a.
So timing on this is judged by not when we want to announce something. It's more based on when we need to make the payment that's going to require it, so that you delay that fee as late as possible. So we've done it on that basis, but we thought in here we pretty much disclosed that it's there and it's being done. So if we're still making payments next week, they're clearly coming out of debt. So but if it requires, it doesn't seem like something that requires just a separate announcement saying that.
From an investor's point of view, I guess it's removing a bit of risk, potential investors knowing that all the CPs have been met.
And that's what we're trying to say here. Okay. Yeah, look, we'll look at it.
I see it that way as well. It's just maybe it's the amateur investor. That's just the way I've got it.
Okay, that's all right.
Well,
we'll look at it. We'll look at it and make a statement.
Yeah, and then the Chinese team is now coming from Jinping to site. They'll build up to about 20 people, and then it tapers down again towards commissioning. And the first team of them will also arrive now in the beginning of April. We didn't want to get them to sit on site. You don't want a bunch of Chinese sitting around there doing nothing. So we've timing that with the equipment that comes from Dar es Salaam. But getting out of China is not a problem at the moment. Getting back into China is the issue, but that's not our problem as well. So that's our agreement with them is they come and they do the construction, the commissioning, and they go home, and then they off our books again. And as I said, the waste rock mining will start now in April. And I've also had questions about the waste rock and the weathering and the depth and all of this. I've put them to a section of the mine where there's literally, it's from surface or 30 centimeters of overburn, which gets cleared and grubbed by the contractor, and it will be straight into competent rock, which will need to be drilled and blasted to put on the waste rock, because you need competent rocks of certain sizes, and that gets compacted on site. So any questions about what's happening on site or in China?
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
So in terms of the contractors, it's really good to hear that it sounds like they're all travelling really well. Are there any challenges with respect to retaining people? In Australia, for example, we really struggle with actually having our contractors being able to have that employee retention. Do your contractors
Well,
have that issue?
not at all. No, this is the first mining project to start up in 10 years in Tanzania. So there's more than enough skilled people to do. And with these contractors, it's not there's engineers obviously on site, but it's mainly drivers and equipment operators and for the batch plant operators. So there's a smattering of skilled people, and the rest are unskilled that do the work. So there's no issue at all. There's no shortage of labour in Tanzania. Yeah.
Another question around, so I noted that with respect to equipment, the spares, and that it's not critical path, but I was just
Yeah, there will be some of them production windows, stuff like mill liners or crusher liners, for instance. But it's certainly not something you're going to need in your first 3 months. But it's all on the schedule, as I said. It's planned for leaving China at the end of April, and that hasn't changed to date. Until the shipping lines push things around, that's still the plan.
Wonderful. So one thing that we are, one thing that I'm really noticing at the moment with respect to manufacture, particularly large equipment, where you've got things like so transistors and various components. It
Yep.
sounds like your equipment's quite simple, but is there, so could there be risk of challenges within the supply chain to manufacturing?
The control units come in on the second last shipments, and quite a number of the control units are, and some of those still have to come together. So arguably the sort of risk that you're concerned about will be related to that, but they're not really highly computerized and things like that. They're relatively
There's a bit of complexity there, Mike, but it's if they leave a month late, it's still not going to put the project behind schedule, because they're not on that they're not that critical to the path of the construction, because it's mainly now the mechanical construction that happens, buildings and conveyors and all that, and then the instrumentation and the electrics come in at a later stage. This is just this is probably about a month and a half old already now, the aerial photograph, but you can see the tailings preparations there in the background. It's not a huge area, it's not by all means, but it's the design is so that we're building this in stages, therefore deferring some of the capital up front. You certainly don't need to build a tailings dam for 20 years to start. So it's been built, and then as we mine waste rock, it all goes onto the tailings dam, saves you from building huge waste rock dumps, for instance, and gets used there. And what we don't use there, we will also be building a dam going forward. That's also not on the critical path. That's just for to ensure that we have enough fresh water.
That site behind it, Andrew, is that part of our site, or is that just something that looks like it's being worked at some stage?
That's just agricultural stuff, yeah. So most of these trees here, this is just a buffer that I've left between the plant area and the tailings dam. Those are mostly cashew nut trees. We're the proud owner of 20,000 cashew nut trees on our mining license, so that's another business opportunity. I know you just don't ask me what. I've been asked the question, so what is the yield and what can you make out of it? No, I don't know. Right, now, offtake agreements is something that we often get asked. When I was negotiating these binding term sheets in China, we deliberately didn't want to go down the pricing pathway. So we got all the agreements in place with Wogan and two of our other partners in China, which want about 75% of our product through them. If we fixed prices 3 years ago, you'll certainly be crying now with pricing where it is at the moment. So those are still in play, and we've started talking to them again, because we've always said 6 months out from production we'll start talking to these people, and it will mainly be around the pricing mechanism, and then also you'll have to get this into a binding offtake agreement, which will mean payment terms, shipping, and all that. And I'm certainly not going to do it. We also bring somebody on board that will take care of that for us. That's worked with these things throughout this person's life. So that is also due to happen now and go forward in all seriousness. Wogan, we've got a very good relationship with them. Wogan is an international group out of the guys we deal with are out of Hong Kong, but not so much anymore. They moved to the States because of all the lockdowns in Hong Kong, but they've got a very good team in China. So they're very China focused, but we have recently expanded their mandate to look further. So they bring in quite a few inquiries from outside of Asia. So and our agreement with Wogan is good in our view, because they pay you 80% of the perceived value of the consignment at FOB at the port in Dar es Salaam. So say, for instance, if it's a $10 million worth of consignment, they'll give you 80% of that value, and the 20% is then kept for the on cost, and as they sell it then to the customers. So we in close, it's a very good relationship that we've got with them, and we're working on that at the moment as well. They have a minimum of 10,000 tonnes and a maximum of 30,000 tonnes that they can take. And to get rid of our small stuff is no problem. As I said, if it goes into the battery market, wherever it goes, but where most of their attention is, and where most of our attention is the high value end of it. It's the larger flakes, because that's where you want we also don't want to deal with anybody. We want to deal with reputable companies wherever they are, because that's where most of our value lies. Although we'll be producing, quarter of our product will be the smaller flakes, that's only 12% of our revenue. So you can see why we're not too worried about that. That's one of these, you'll do the deal and it just lies there and it looks after itself, but it's the other one where you're constantly working on it with your customers. As I said, there's been quite a bit of interest from outside of China. Just recently when I was in Tanzania, I was approached by one of the European countries' ambassadors that had just said, we cannot be so reliant on China. And Russia also came into it for obvious reasons, but they want to put us in front of business people from that country that deal in graphite, because they do realize the need to diversify their supply. Looming shortfall, as I said, I recently read an article that this year there's a shortfall of 85,000 tonnes predicted in graphite. Where that's going to come from, I'm not sure, but it seems like the right time to get for a company to going into production. And we certainly don't want to oversell our product. We have an agreement for 75%. I can't take on everybody that comes across my desk and say, yes, we can commit to another 5,000 or 10,000 tonnes, because then we will be over-promising and under-delivering. Yes, there's spare capacity in the plant, but you're not going to push the button of a plant and it's going to be running at nameplate capacity in the first month or 3 months. So you've got to take that into consideration, that we're not going to be producing 40,000 tonnes for the first year. You have to bring that back into your contracts as well. But the last thing you want in the graphite industry, it's the relationships that you have with your offtake partners. And if you sour that relationship before you started, it's not going to go well for you. And I know with some of the other graphite plays how they did it in China and why they have problems at the moment. Any questions on this?
Actually, if I can make a couple of points on separate ways. So in a changing pricing market, it moves to one party rather than the other. So, we get a little bit more negotiating power on that. But we will seek to honour those ones as long as we can come to terms on pricing. But as we've said in the market update, what's happening there is the European premium is increasing a lot. And the fact that China is also now a net importer of graphite means that that dynamic has changed a little bit from 2019 when we first set those offtake arrangements in place. So we don't have to race to wrap this up. Clearly, probably the next quarter is the logical time in which we'll get those dealt with. But first right of refusal, I guess, ultimately goes to these parties, because they're the ones we've contracted with today. But if in our time frame we can't get an appropriate deal for the company and for you guys as shareholders, then what Andrew's described is there are many other options that are available there. The other part which is important to understand on this is we're not just selling a generic product. In our graphite, because of various carrying characteristics, there are different premiums that Andrew's already referred to. You do it at higher quality, so the TGC percentage is higher. There'll be uplifts in premiums and pricing around that. Clearly, size of flake gives you premium. Expansion ratio in the hands of a customer that matters to, they'll give you a premium. So part of our product marketing challenge is to get our product into the hands of the type of customers that are going to pay you the most for each of those premium elements that exist within our product. So it's not a generic marketing exercise, and that's why we're going to have to bring a little bit more skills into the company. Peter Finnemore, who's come on board, Chief Marketing Officer of South 32, is good direction of helping us in a establishing that. But you know, a lot of people ask, why haven't we done the offtakes? Why haven't we done the offtakes? Lock it in. You know, we're in a very good time. If we were trying to build this mine 2 years ago, when we all would have liked to have been building the mine, we were in a very different market in terms of the way in which we.
I often get asked the question as well is how big can this thing be? It's financial institutions, and we've spoken about a lot now about how many people are approaching us, new interest in the project because they see that we the next graphite mine that's going to be in the market. And I said it last night, and I've said it before. When we started this project, when we were looking for funding, you were in a catch-22 situation. Is the funders want to know where your offtake agreements are, and the offtake guys want to know when you're going to be in production. Now it's much easier having those discussions with offtakers to say, they say when you're going to be in production, it's 6 months out or 7 months out or 5 months out. It's much easier having those conversations. They don't want to commit any serious offtake agreement, will not want to commit to something that he has no idea when he's going to get it, because that's we all see many of that in the market, and I don't pay too much attention to it. Grow, yes, the plant has 23% spare capacity in it. We can, without any capital expenditure, produce up to 52,000 tonnes per annum. We're not going to commit to that now. Let's first get this thing up and running. Let's get it running up at nameplate capacity, and we produce what we said we're going to produce. So if we can produce to spec, then we can always look into growing this. If we see there's a huge demand and we have to push that faster, then we'll do that. But if we have to go even bigger than that, there's more than graphite in that part of the world that you can poke a stick at, and on our ground especially. It's on the mining license itself. There's graphite occurrences that I know of that we've exposed now through the dosing of the mining boundary. These things, there's new high-grade graphite lenses that we've exposed. We haven't drilled these things. Everything around us is, in any case, our prospecting licenses. I know of quite a few graphite occurrences there, which coincide with the electromagnetics that we did, and we've got our neighbouring licenses as well, which has got quite long conductors of material, which is obviously the graphite, which coincides with high grade. Our mantra is always high grade, and irrespective of what the questions I get, what does high grade mean? High grade always wins the end of the day in the mining industry. It's just much easier mining something at 18%. Your mining fleet is smaller, your plant is smaller. It's much cheaper doing it than mining something at 5%. We didn't go out here to get the highest MPV in the world. We went out for high margins. That was from the start, and we haven't changed our strategy from then. We've got the Kamoingan project up north, which we've got an exploration target on. I've worked there in the Kamoingan area for the first time more than 20 years ago, so I know the area very well, and therefore we just picked up that piece of ground. And so there's a lot of options for us. It's the low-grade stockpiles, which is running at higher grades than our peer groups run of mine or the reserve grade. So do we go into the the downstream part of it? I have done a scoping study on that, so we've got those numbers. We haven't announced it to the market. Our focus is still on getting the upstream part done. Let's get that done and get it done well before we can do that. We know what the capex is needed to build something in Tanzania or elsewhere, but we haven't changed our focus. I see it in many of our peer groups is that they've gone now onto the upstream part of it, downstream part of it. Yeah, and they've lost focus of the upstream portion. I can see what's happening on site in Tanzania, and there's not much happening. So, as I said, my firm belief is that even if our peer groups get their funding today, they're still 2-3 years behind us before they get to the stage where we are now. It's not easy doing this. We've been working on it for a long time, and I've been spending a lot of my time in Tanzania. But for them to get where we are now is not just going to be push a button and off you go.
Andrew, is there a difference visually in a high-grade graphite to a lower-grade
Yep.
in situ? So for selective mining,
Yeah.
it's easier to pick that?
Very easy. So we've got in our just been looking at our staffing. We're working through that now, and as Mike will tell you, is that a lot of my attention is now going into the operational readiness side of the thing. Is that, look, the contractor's on site, and Bruce is a project manager, that he's taking care of all that it happens, and happens within budget, and that we try and keep it on time. But now we need to start focusing on running this thing, because we are 6-7 months out from production. We still need to get the teams in place, and who's going to do that. But it's always been in the back of our mind is having a spotter on there, because you can further high grade this thing if you want to. It is, and I showed Mike yesterday is if you look at a hand sample of the stuff, it's just it's black, and then it gets a different color of grey. It's very distinctive of how it looks, how the high grade is. So it's quite easy to cut it. We're very fortunate is that these high grade zones that we've got at 25% and sometimes 40% and 45% are surrounded by something that's 10%, 9%. So I dilute with any mining operation, you do get dilution. You don't cut the thing like a cookie cut. There's always some of the waste rock comes in, but our waste is something that's running at 10%. So therefore, your overall head grade is at 18%, because your high grade zones are getting diluted by something that's 10%. So it's not that we've got 0% sitting next to 25%. It's a package, and then you'll mine that as selectively as you can, and the other stuff that's running at above 6, 8 or 8%, you'll put on your low grade stockpile to do whatever with later, or you can use it for blending, or because it's quite important that you feed the plant at a constant grade. It's in any mining operation, you try and do that as well as you can, so you'll have your lower grade stuff there. If you see the grade is too high, you can always just dumb the grade down to get it what you want. ESG, we've spoken a lot about that in the past few weeks. As I said, this project was designed. It wasn't designed as an Australian project that's going to be run from Perth. It's always been our focus is that it's run by in Tanzania. It's a Tanzanian company. The loans with the Tanzanian Bank, the offtake contracts is with the Tanzanian company, and there's obviously a loan account between Walkabout and Lindi Jumbo. So when the mining laws changed in 2017, a big focus on that, other than the 16% free carry interest, which was always in the mining law in any case, and a big focus was the local content, which every African company or country that I've worked in has a local content component to it, where they want, for me, for instance, they want to see who's my understudy and what am I doing to upskill this person to get him to the desired capacity to do what I do. So we went back, we looked at our definitive feasibility study, and we didn't have to do one change, nothing. It's the way we designed this thing, with the people who's going to run it and our commitment to the government. There was nothing we needed to change. We submitted our local content plan. We were the first company in country to do that. It was approved, and that was what used for the template that they're now rolling out to all the other countries. Or other companies. So there's nothing that we had to do. It was always our intention. We went out there when we started, when I started the drilling campaign in 2015. We set up memorandums of understanding with the local villages to commit that we will pay them for any damage that we do, roads that we put on their farms. We pay them according to the rate that the government says we have to pay them. We'll use their people for employment, and we've been doing that now for a number of years, and it's worked out very well for us. We've helped their people. We've put some of them through schools. We've donated. We've built clinics. We've helped with the church. We've helped with the mosque. We've drilled water holes. We've refurbished some of the old water pumps for them. But all of this you do in any case for a country. You can't just run into a country and think that I'm Australian, now I'm going to start drilling here. It doesn't work like that. So we, fortunately, all of us that work there, we're well aware of. I'm from Africa, so I understand how things need to be done, and it's worked out very well. Our relationship with the villages is very good. They are helping us as far as they can. They understand now. We don't have money to fork out. The money that we have goes into the project. It's a very tight project. It's a very tight budget, very tight schedule. We just don't have the money to throw around. But that said, you still have to help the local villages. They do see the benefits of the employment. Our subcontractors have the same philosophy. They employ locally. So they do see all those benefits of the money. All the procurement is done locally as far as we can, as far as food, for instance, all of that. It's a very poor region. Our relocation assistance program, for instance, we did it very transparent. We got the government evaluators in, we did all that, and we paid it within 6 months as the law states. I haven't seen anybody else do it in the 6 months as the law states when you get your mining license. We started our construction with the early works within 18 months. As the law states, you have to do it. If you don't do it, you have to redo your environmental impact assessment at huge cost. Now, these are all surprises lying out there for other people. But we just stuck to our guns, and we've done it. With the 5% ownership, that's also part of the mining law. It's not a free carry interest. It's a 5% ownership by locals, but they have to buy in. We decided, well, right from the start is let's not just give it to a high net worth individual, because what's the value? Who's got millions of dollars to fork out? We'll give that 5% ownership to the local village who will earn into this. Once they've paid it off, then those dividends can be distributed in the village. It's extremely poor area. This is Africa's poor all over, but this is really poor. And it will be managed by ourselves and the local leaders of the 3 villages affected, and then also the district commissioner will form the board, and those distributions will go. We're discussing at a board level on how do we do that, because the last thing you want to do in Africa is to say, well, you've got 5% ownership, but you're only going to see the benefits 7 years down the line once you've earned your interest here. So there's ways of taking care of that, and as a board we're looking at that at the moment to bring that forward. COVID-19, you've all seen the announcements that we've made. We brought the district medical officer in. He explained COVID to everybody. We must understand this rural Africa, 3 kilometers down the road, there's a witch doctor. So you've got to be careful how you deal with these things. We have our first clinic that we had on site. Over 50% of the people had their vaccinations done at that day. And then we've been doing this on a regular basis in the villages. We've committed to the district medical officer that we will help them, not only with COVID. COVID is one of the things that wants to kill you in Africa. There's lots of other stuff as well. So we helping them, going to the villages and rolling out and just giving them logistical support. No real money. We will help them with vehicles and transport and all that.